Yeah, you know, the worst thing is you have a client come to you saying, we want to use virtual reality, we want to use any technology. They come to you and say, well, we don't think you should, we think you should use this. And they say no, and then you build a project, and then we say, well, you know, there's going to be these issues, and they go, we want to do virtual reality. We say, well, actually, try changing this bit of the virtual reality to this. No, we want to do this, and then they get the end product, you deliver exactly what they want, and they're like, oh. We've seen such a rise of it with virtual reality.
I think one of the other problems, well, not problem, but the challenge of VR is you can't talk to someone about it. You can't describe it in words. You can't show them a video. You just have this. We find the gear VR really handy because we can take it to people and just put it on their heads, and they say, "What's VR?" Okay, there you go, and they go, "Right, get it now."
So that's
an experience.
The other question is in terms of like, it's still a very solo experience. Is anyone sort of started experimenting with having that person stood next to you in terms of that avatar character, having some relationship between those two devices?
Well, again, it's kind of tracking as well. With mobile devices, it's much harder, obviously. But you know, you're looking at stuff like you've got Project Tango that Google Web. You know, well, that's essentially a lidar tracker. But it's not lidar, but it's essentially a parallax tracker. You know, an infrared tracker. So if that can recognise people in a space, then you know you can have a dual virtual reality experience with a mobile phone. Now at the moment you can have two connects and two computers linked up and networked and see each other in a virtual space. That's not really a problem. And yeah, but mobile it would be a little while, I believe.
But I mean, we've got virtual meetups with people in Canada. So we all jump into this VR chat room, Oculus on, everyone's.
But you get those difference because you get superpowers and stuff.
Yes, you have a meeting about budget on the top of a mountain with a sunset next to you. It's very strange and crazy, and it's a bit janky at the moment, but you know, Facebook, they might go, like you mentioned, that whole social, you know, a few years.
Like this, which I haven't done well. But
yeah, maybe we are talking on the and that's really useful.
I think I remember the chap from Second Life. I can't remember his name, but he's very interested in VR. Obviously, with Second Life. But he was saying, as it was exactly that point of 3D scanning. If you're talking to your grandmother who's at the other side of the planet, and her VR headset or whatever device is scanning her room with her, it then gets transmitted to you, and you're inside with her. And so with 3D scanning combined with VR, you can then start to have people sharing the same experience together, that kind of stuff. But then the HoloLens as well, in a physical space with AR, augmenting over a physical space is obviously another easy kind of win, I think.
Yeah, basically you have a Kinect and a HoloLens, and then place someone in that space.
Rather than 3D scanning, could you just use like a forward, could you just use a forward-facing camera? Because I've seen things where they just had like forward-facing cameras.
Yeah, but you just have them on a 2D plane, essentially. Yeah, that would be a problem. Yeah.
Are there any other? Let's get another question. Yes.
A lot of it seems to be Facebook, Google, and so on. What's Apple doing in this space? Are they just not betting on it?
I heard they're hiring a lot of people.
I think they're kind of going for the
stars.
But you know, going back to what he said earlier, it's true. Like the reason Apple are falling behind to a certain degree is because it is so hard to get stuff onto it. Their approval process is so much more closed than it is with Google. You know, Google. I mean, unique software you can publish to pretty much any mobile platform, but that's not standard the way. It's the fact that they're so rigid with what they want you to submit to apply and wait 3 weeks. You know.
I think looking at also at Google with their like kind of culture, they've never been almost the first, let's say, to do stuff. They've kind of waited for people to go, try it out, and then they've come out and absolutely smashed it and done it better. So I think maybe at the moment they're holding back. This is just like speculation, but I think they're holding back, waiting for all the kind of dud releases to be done. Like, because Google are more like, yeah, just test it, open source, VR, like all this kind of thing. Let's wait for it to be done by everyone, and then we're going to come out and smash it later. That's just speculation, but that's maybe what they're doing, because they kind of, when they do a release, they do it right. They don't let it go through development.
And VR is
smartwatch path.
Yeah.
VR as well.
2 years later, they come out and play.
But VR is technically a wearable.
Are there other questions in the audience? Yes. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's...
We'll take the back and then you. Okay. Yes.
At the end of February, there was a big conference held about VR in Bristol,
and they streamed the whole conference using Rift Max. So essentially, people from all over the world could just chuck their Rifts on their face and engage in this conference and watch what was going on, watching all the talks. Do you think that's going to be like shared virtual reality experiences? Do you think that's going to be like a revenue or an avenue for the future?
I think the big problem, there's a few big problems with it at the moment. I mean, obviously conferences like that is cool, you know, but when you're talking about live concerts, sporting occasions, you know, you're talking about much larger numbers of people wanting to get onto that server, and you're also talking about broadcast rights. You know, who owns, what kind of broadcast is this, who owns the broadcast rights? So that is kind of like a big issue to get over, really. If people think that they're not going to make as much money from it, then they're going to try and block it happening, basically.
I wouldn't be surprised if you could get front row seats to the NBA and we actually get a number of slots on the server.
Do it exclusivity.
So you start, create scarcity, provide virtual scarcity, basically. You could maybe do stuff like that and then monetize.
Well, you manage all the streaming resolutions.
Yeah, it's going to be like HD.
Is the filming kit a barrier? It's just the physical space it takes up at a performance?
I think one of the barriers is the fact that at the moment everyone's trying to kind of fake it, but getting stereo 360 filming is
tough.
It's kind of impossible. Like, you know, there's ways of people stitching. You've kind of got kind of key zones where it becomes kind of stereoscopic, but it's conceptually kind of impossible. So everyone's kind of talking about kind of like processing and.
Well, talking a lot about light fields and overlapping ranges. So obviously you've got two, you know, if you've got a set of 8 cameras and they overlap by 20 degrees each, you can use that 20 degrees for stitching. You know, the kind of light field cameras as well. But I mean, I'm not a scientist, like I've said for like 4 times. But I mean, it's light field technology basically, and it takes the chips, I believe, have multiple sensors facing directions, so you can see things from different angles in one photo. So you know that seems like something which may work.
Yeah, so when the Oculus first came out, there was a lot of talk about motion sickness, that kind of thing. So you guys have done a lot of out-of-home stuff and worked across a lot of devices. So I was just wondering what your anecdotal evidence on that was and what your kind of experience was, what you've done to combat that.
It's a big question, isn't it? Like,
I've kind of learned how to play the motion sickness game and dodge it. Don't use when you're using when you're using like a Kinect, don't go sideways and forwards at the same time. That's not great. You know, so you have to kind of reduce. I think it's kind of it's on our part, kind of a responsibility for us when we're developing things, is to develop things that aren't going to cause motion sickness. Because one bad VR experience for the newbies is going to ruin it for the masses, you know, and it's not, I think like doing bad VR and really crap VR just to get it out there is really, really negative for all of us. And so you have to kind of build in the controls that through our knowledge and our anecdotal experiences to like not allow those motion sickness things to happen. So don't allow people to go sideways and forward at the same time because it does make you feel a little bit sick.
Experience is pretty safe.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you want to make them sick, this experience is about making them feel pleased.
Like oh, I feel really sick.
I mean, there's a
I'm
difference
thinking,
between,
you go to Alton Towers, you feel sick too, but you go back every year with your kids.
There's a good sick and a bad sick.
Is speed one of the factors, how quickly you're moving through the environment?
That's balance.
There's technical things that are bad, you know, like refresh rates being too low, like, you know, lag, stuff like that makes people feel building. I notice when when we're developing games, when you're going into the next level and if it hasn't got the right kind of development, it kind of lags and freezes. So when a person's moving around, their image is frozen straight away. You know, kind of errors in the game can take a real physical effect and really negative versus a website or a game where you have a bit of a pause, you don't really feel it. But in VR, it's kind of dangerous.
Even like I was saying earlier about that, the speed at which those bits of data appeared off objects when we looked at them made a difference. Slowing it down was easier, and when you had a little tiny fade on it, made a big difference as well. And switching from one camera to the other, fade it slowly through the lag from the screen is easier to handle than just switching it immediately. It's just tiny, but you wouldn't know until you tried it. So you just got
Locomotion is a massive challenge right now in VR, and obviously with the Vive, HTC Vive, there's the Lighthouse tech, which is full room scanning. But you still have issues with when you get to the edge of the room and you want a character to keep walking, what happens then? I've seen some really interesting experiments, I think, on the Oculus forums where people were able to control like a ring on the ground, and then they would then teleport to that point. So they were controlling where they wanted to go, and then they just fade into that position there. So they could control where they wanted to go, but they weren't travelling through really fast. Other stuff like yaw, actually spinning sideways, can cause severe sickness. So I know this is echoing Karl Maddix. He says that if you can stick someone on a swivel chair and get them to move themselves while moving forwards, it feels a lot more natural than less. And we've tested that a little bit ourselves, and we found that does actually reduce the kind of potential sickness as well. So
It's
there's
slightly exaggerated. So if you turn your head 90 degrees, you turn them around 100 degrees, and you can fool them into walking in a circle when they haven't actually done it. But it's early days.
So a question from the side, and then I'll come back to the back again.
So
From the
just
side.
one thing as well, putting a pixel in the middle of the screen, fixed point, seems to help.
It's very scientific. It's about some shit.
What do you think about
Yeah.
what do you think about the tango, the motion tracking, and your area finding all combined? Is it going to change the way you are going to generate VR, or like not?
I don't know much about. All I've seen
No.
of Project Tango is a video about 6 months ago. But if it lives up to what it should do, yeah.
I mean, if you
We've
were
got
to
less.
stand at home at the same time and to actually move and know the path, what would you do? Like, that's the question, because I work.
Yes, there's like, yeah, it's amazing, but that's where kind of augmented reality and virtual reality start to overlap, and everyone's like, yeah, well, I'd love to see this in my own environment. So then they think about that, but lots of the scanning we see is kind of looks pretty cruddy still. You know, you get a beautiful kind of scanning room from this location, and then I move here, like I know it's going to become continuously scanned. It's still kind of projection.
An artist to step in and move it.
Yeah, I was saying to the guys that we do a lot of like film and TV, and for us to put a CG car in the middle of this room, you know, it would take us a long time. We'd have to put probes in there and get reflections and lighting from that particular area. So I find it difficult to imagine, like probably, I don't know where I am in the world, but I can't imagine how that car's going to look like it's sat there instantly, you know, like in real time. I think it's amazing, and obviously in years to come it will happen.
See, but I like the idea of saying, okay, I'm scanning this environment, so I can move around this space, but it doesn't actually have to be this space, like just a totally virtual, procedurally generated space, which is based on physical dimensions.
That's really kind of, yeah.
Does everyone get what Project Tango is? Yeah. Okay, so I was just saying that because it's something that I wasn't so sure about until now. So it is, just so that you know, it's scanning the room. I just wanted to like jump in just because.
Did you have a
in case
motion
you
Like
were
lighthouse,
newbies like me just in a video?
stuff,
Then I'm good.
constantly scanning the environment.
Like,
I like it augmenting the real environment, the physical. Like we tried weird experiments in the office where we build, because we've got our own office built out in the so we get his client to sit down on the sofa, you know, in the right position, and when he takes it off and he's really here and he puts it back on again, and it really freaks people out.
That is a wicked way to start an experience. Have the headset on, and then sit in the environment. The virtual environment is your real environment, and then say for example they took off and you change that environment around, that would mess with it seriously.
There's so many good applications that mess with you, and it's amazing. Fundamentally.
Starlight in the chair, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
You see it. You sit in a room and it changes little things. Every time you look backwards and forwards, so you look at a light, then you look away, and you've got a Mars bar on the table. Then you look back, and the light's changing into a lamp, and the Mars bar's changing into a donut.
It messes
And
with
it's like,
the
whoa, and then you start looking, and then your room like fades away into a forest, and you look back, it's become like pyramids. Oh, it's just
The graphics aren't great, you know, like the graphics are like PlayStation 1 graphics, but it doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah.
That's the good thing about VR. Everyone's thinking about how can we reproduce reality, but we should be trying to reproduce your dreams. That's much cooler.
dinosaurs.